over the last few years of being an artist, being a creative, being a designer, I have come to realize that you don't need to be reinventing the wheel to be original. And watching Wicked made me realize that. And what I mean by that is when I first watched The Wizard of Oz, I remember thinking, wow, how does somebody come up with this? How does somebody think like this? How do you spin this out of nothing? How do you conjure up visuals and colors and characters and a fantasy land like this? It felt like a fever dream, and as I started reading more about it and where the inspiration comes from, I read that it was all from Frank L. Baum, the original author. The story, it comes from a mix of his childhood stories and the strong women in his family, and even the economic times that he was raised in. Although he hasn't really confirmed this, but there are parallels to the theme of the movie and also the populist movement, which was the era that he was in. So this made me think about how the work that we do is heavily inspired by the decade that we were born in, the way you were raised, what you are consuming, how you have been creating all your life, who is inspiring you, and all of this together makes up your unique perspective. And that's what makes you original. It sounds kind of obvious, but for the longest time, and even right now, I struggle with the idea of originality. I feel like the projects that I do have to be original, unique, never been seen before by anyone on this earth. And that hinders my ability to just create and put something out there. It hinders the ability for an idea to just exist as an idea. It puts so much pressure on myself to just try and make something. In a way, this thought, this video, this idea, this video essay is also not original. But it is a learning. It is the way that I have learned this lesson. It's the way that my brain formed this connection, and I am choosing to get over this fear of it's not original, but I'm still choosing to share it. It's my way of getting over it. Okay, back to The Wizard of Oz. So after Frank L. Baum has written that story in the 1900s, every few years there was a new adaptation of it. There was a movie, or silent movie, or like a small play, and each adaptation, although it has the same foundation of this story, it was fundamentally still unique and different because of the people who have created it and the people who have chosen to express that idea. The main 1935 movie that we all know, that gets most of the spotlight, but it was new because of the way it transitioned from black and white to color, and the way that the music has been scored for it, the props and the set design. That's what made it new and original. And then later, many years later, Gregory Maguire, 95 years after the original story by Frank L. Baum has been written, wrote Wicked. And it was a revisionist prequel to the movie. And in my eyes, I kind of see this as someone who was so intrigued by the 1935 movie and the original story in the 1900s, noticed a few gaps, wanted to see something about the backstory of these characters, and chose to bring it to life. That is how I see it. And so he had these questions, he had these creative gaps that he identified and chosen to expand it. at the time he was writing Wicked, he was in London. It was like the Gulf War time, and there were all these headlines about, is Saddam the new Hitler? And these headlines were making him examine how are labels manufacturing villains? Are people really born wicked? And you can see these themes like directly translated into the movie and into the writing. And so this cultural context of where he was born, what he was seeing, is directly brought into the movie, and that's what informs his original perspective. So he provided this backstory to the 1935 film with cultural relevance to his time and also arguably now, because the themes that he was talking about was present when he was writing it. So I see this as a lesson. You can choose to be inspired by anything. You can choose to be inspired by everything only if you have the eyes to see it. And so adding your perspective is making the result unique. A friend that I went to school with, Pedro Bernstein, he was inspired by this essay called Approximations to the Object, and chose to expand on this by critiquing it, commenting on it. And he wrote a book called Commentary on Approximations of the Object, and it's an inquiry into design literature. His originality is his perspective and his chosen form factor, which is the book. Throughout these years of just learning, consuming, creating, I've come to realize that a lot of my own creative process is gratitude. You and I, we stand on the shoulders of the people who have come before us. It reminds me of this quote by this philosopher, Bernard of Chartres. I hope I'm saying that right. We are like dwarves sitting on the shoulders of giants. We see more, and the things that are more distant are not because of any sharpness of our sight on our part or any physical superiority, but because we are carried aloft and elevated by the magnitude of these giants. So I see this as each piece of art that's being created stands as a revolution, a cultural revolution in my eyes, because it is this amalgamation of their gratitude to what has come before and acknowledgement of the present and what's happening around you, and you're choosing to respond to it. So I see it like this. The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, 1935, culturally iconic because it was responding to the times that Frankel Baum was born in. And now we have so many adaptations of it. So the next thing, how do we come up with the next cultural revolution? It's not just about building upon the past's success, but we got to be inspired by that piece and create a future that we want to see. So if we translate this to Wicked, it's the same thing. You are being inspired by the 1935 film, the original 1900 story, and expanding on it. And you are creating a world that you want answers for, and you want to see, and you want to critique and question. And the idea of revisionist creativity appears across many fields. I see the same patterns in music, like in sampling. We are being inspired by a fragment, a rhythm, and deconstructing it, or manipulating it to create this new foundation, and a new song comes out of it. Even in art, like a very classic example is Andy Warhol's piece. Nothing about the images that he has used are original. Marilyn Monroe or the tomato soup can, they are not new in any way, but what makes it an intriguing piece of work is his perspective on color, composition, recontextualization of these images in accordance to the times that he was brought up in. Even scientists work off of their peers' work. They identify gaps in current knowledge or unanswered hypotheses, and they design experiments to fill that. The discoveries are original, but they are built upon rigorous foundations built by the scientists that have come before them. Even code works like this. Open source code, developers take existing code, which it acts as a foundation, they modify it, expand its functionality, and the process is transparent, it's collaborative, and it's entirely based on the premise that building upon each other's work is the most effective and efficient way towards innovation. And so I feel that with each piece that you choose to put out into the world, originality comes through gratitude. It comes through your process, the way you go about the research, the questions you're asking, how you're making the prototypes, what kind of people you're choosing to engage with, who do you want to bring who do you want in your process to bring this vision to life. Even in the Oz movies, each director, actor, they all bring their own flair. Each set designer has their own unique way of creating a prop, and that adds to the magic of this vision, and that's original. I believe that acknowledging our past and our history is the best way to create and design for the future. It may be the same patterns, but it's still original. Like anything that you're making is still new, because there's always a new perspective, there's always new context, there's always new resources, there's always something different that's happening in each decade that you are responding to with your work. So I'm learning to change my definition of originality to the process of integrating yourself into the idea. If the idea doesn't feel original enough, then perhaps it's just not personal enough. That's what I'm going with.